Welcome to Here's What I Learned. I'm your host, Jackie Hayes. I'm a certified online business manager and launch strategist for coaches craving a greater hustle-free impact. On this podcast, my guests and I pull back the curtain on running a successful online coaching business. So sit back, take notes, and enjoy. In today's episode, Megan Kierstead and I are talking about neurodiversity and entrepreneurship. Megan is a certified life coach with ADHD, chronic illness, and cool hair. She helps multi-passionate rule breakers create an empowering, playful relationship to getting shit done that is compatible with their unique body and brain. All right, Megan, if we could just kick things off with an explanation of what ADD, ADHD, neurodiversity happens to be. I think a lot of people are familiar, or at least heard them, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know what they mean.
Absolutely. So ADD, or it is now, I think, officially known as ADHD, is an acronym for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which is something that we currently label as a disorder officially in the psychiatric manual that they use to diagnose people. Which brings me to the next topic, which is neurodivergence and neurodiversity. So ADHD is essentially a different type of nervous system. It has a lot of different implications, but roughly speaking, it means you produce less dopamine in certain situations, and it means that you really need to be interested in things to continue to engage with them. And it means that there are also things in your brain that you are less good at. And these are things that are called executive functions. And roughly it corresponds to things like planning and organization and time management, some forms of emotional regulation, but it is a different type of nervous system, which is where neurodivergence comes in. So if you hear someone using the term neurodivergent or neurodiversity, these come from, I think were started to be used first time in the late 1990s by some autism activists. And the point really was that there are certain types of nervous systems that aren't disorders, they're just different. If you think of a population, we have variation in a lot of different ways. We have different hair color, we have different eye color, we see variation in heights, and we also see variation in a lot of other different things. And the activists who sort of lead the neurodiversity movement, their point is that things like autism and ADHD aren't actually disorders, they're just different types of nervous systems. And that one of the things that keeps a population going is actually diversity. If anyone has ever taken an evolutionary biology class or a genetics class, the reason genetic variation is good, it means different traits can sort of get passed on and a species is likely to survive. So neurodiversity just refers to the variation in nervous systems across a population, which there are a lot of different types of nervous systems. And people who are neurodivergent, if you think about a population as a whole, they're the people who are sort of at either ends of the spectrum. If we think of something as like a bell curve, they would be the people at either ends. They exhibit things that are not typical, which is where the term neurotypical comes in. Hopefully, it's a big topic, and I wanted to give the intro to it without getting too much into the academic stuff. But ADHD is a form of this. It is a form of a different type of nervous system. It's not something that can be cured. It is not something that is an illness. It is just part of who you are. It's like having, blue eyes, but with some more implications about behavior and stuff. So my few minute diatribe on neurodivergence and ADHD.
And I think you bringing up the concept of whether or not it's a disorder, I think about introversion and extroversion, and they have found that introverts react to stimuli differently than extroverts do. They're much more sensitive, and they find it clear, when they're infants, So are we going to label that as a disorder, or it's literally a different wiring in your nervous system? So
exactly. Very, very much. The introversion versus extroversion is a great example of that. And in fact, sensory stimuli are one of the things that often ADHD people have issues with because we have essentially fewer filters on our system. So it is very easy to get overwhelmed. So it's a really good parallel to the introversion versus extroversion. And one of the reasons we have to use the label ADHD because otherwise people don't know what you're talking about. But I hate the label. It's a terrible label. We don't have a deficit in attention. It's just our attention is in certain places. We certainly don't have to be hyperactive in the traditional way that you think of hyperactive. So that label, mark my words, is going to change. It is not going to be ADHD forever. And at some point, it might not even be considered a disorder. So
I think when I also think of introversion and extroversion, it becomes an issue because our society is kind of set up for extroverts. And we're all expected to function the way extroverts function, or at least attempt to, or make room for. And I think the same thing can be true when you're talking about something like ADHD or neuroatypical. World is set up one way, and not everybody fits that mold. In fact, a vast majority of people don't fit that mold.
Yeah. There's some really interesting research. I should know the paper citation, but I have a terrible memory for details because I have ADHD, where they actually think ADHD would have been an evolutionary advantage back when we were hunter-gatherers, because it allows you to notice lots of different forms of information and pay attention to things that are important and really just be good in new complex situations. So they looked at some, I believe, some groups of people in Africa who exhibited sort of more ADHD traits, and it turns out it was an advantage. It wasn't considered a disadvantage. I'll have to pull up that citation. But enough people exhibit, at least, I think ADHD is actually probably a few spectrums. Enough people exhibit ADHD traits, they estimate it's around 10% of the population, that's enough to be an advantage in certain situations. That trait wouldn't, if we're looking at the genetics, it wouldn't have stuck around unless it had an advantage. So obviously some things which are genetic mutations stick around, in small numbers just because they don't affect people's ability to pass on their genes. But to be that significant in terms of the percentage of the population, it has to be something that actually confers an advantage. And our society is the thing that makes us have a difficult time. Our society and what they expect of us in terms of a 9-to-5 workday, repetitive tasks, really, doing things linearly. Those are the reasons life is hard for people with ADHD, not because your nervous system is necessarily worse in some way.
I know a lot of people associate ADHD with young boys, but I have discovered lots and lots of women in my circle or in my even my Instagram feed who are in their 30s and their 40s who are like, I just got diagnosed with ADHD. Why does it take so long for women to get diagnosed?
It's a really good question. And it's one that I am very passionate about, advocating for. So it boils down to the fact that when we first started studying ADHD, we looked at young boys. So the vast majority of research that we did on ADHD, particularly in the early days, was on young, typically middle socioeconomically speaking white boys, which means our data was skewed. So when they decided ADHD was a disorder that they wanted to include in the DSM, they were looking at data just from these people. And as it turns out, ADHD, it shows up differently in girls and women. And this is primarily because of our social conditioning. Women and, girls, we learn to mask things. We know that we are not supposed to speak up a lot. We get in trouble for being bossy or loud or abrasive, all of these kind of things. So we get really good at masking. Masking is, something that is recognized actually in the psychiatric literature. We get really good at masking our symptoms and compensating. But it's exhausting. It is not without a significant cost both to your mental and emotional health. So what happens, and I think the pandemic really exacerbated this, is at some point you just get tired of masking. And I think this happens primarily, when women are in their 30s or 40s, because they just have no shits to give. They just stop thinking that they should have to mask these things. They realize that, wait, I think this should be easier. And then they start learning more and start getting a diagnosis. So we're starting to learn how ADHD actually shows up differently in women. And the diagnostic criteria are likely to actually be different, which is fascinating. Like hyperactivity in women often shows up mentally. So rather than like physical outward, like running around the room kind of stuff, it's mental hyperactivity. So like racing thoughts and like not being able to turn your brain off. So we need different criteria. And I think the medical community is still catching up, to be honest. I think, as it turns out, there isn't a lot of awareness about this. There's more and more, thank goodness. But the people who give ADHD diagnoses or refer people for ADHD diagnoses don't know what to look for, particularly with girls and younger women.
And I think that's true for just about everything when it comes to the medical field and research.
Yes, oh my God, it does. Oh, the stories about the horrible things that we used to consider disorders just like break my heart. Until the 1970s, it was formally in the DSM. So the same thing we use to diagnose psychiatric disorders today, homosexuality was included as a psychiatric disorder until the 70s. This isn't like, centuries ago.
Well, and even then, I mean, just when you're thinking of things like heart attacks, they present differently in women. And I had a professor who was going through a stress test, and they're like, no, you're just having anxiety. And she advocated for herself, and they did the stress test, and they're like, oh my God, we got to get you in the surgery room now. Yeah. And had they just sent her home because she was having quote unquote anxiety, she, would not have survived. So.
Super common. It's actually one of the most common. It's unclear if it's a comorbidity, so something that people actually have in partner with ADHD, is anxiety, because it gets misdiagnosed, or that's the first and most obvious thing, which makes sense. Like if you're trying to exist in a world that wasn't designed for you, of course you're going to be anxious. So women and girls are told like, oh, you just have anxiety, which by the way is also a real thing. So let's not downplay anxiety and pretend that it's not actually a very significant thing. But that's one of the first things that's often a sign, is actually getting diagnosed either with anxiety or depression, because you're existing in a world that wasn't designed for you, that isn't supportive of you doing all these things. You also have been masking for your entire life. So unsurprisingly, that's one of the main things that presents. And then you realize later on, oh, of course I was anxious. Essentially, I had an untreated nervous system difference.
So when we're thinking of society and being built in a certain way for a certain group of people, one of those is like you said, the 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, very linear. If you have ADHD or you're neurodivergent, that's not really a world built for you. So it sounds to me like being your own business owner is much better, but you still have all of this traditional advice about how to build a business that's out there. That again, still kind of goes back to corporate culture. What advice would you give to somebody who is building a business, regardless of how their nervous system works?
I mean, I think my biggest piece of advice sort of really directly addresses that, which is do things your own way. Don't think that you have to follow any rules other than perhaps the legal things that you have to do, because you can build a business in almost any way you want to nowadays. That is one of the beautiful things, particularly about the sort of era we're in, where we have all these resources available to us. We can connect to people across the world. You can build a business any way you want. And particularly to build a business, it has to be something that you can do for a long period of time. But most people are not growing businesses in a week. As fun as that might be, that usually is not what the trajectory looks like, which means it's so important to build your business in a way that is aligned with how you naturally exist in the world, the things that you find fun, the things you find interesting, and not force yourself to do all of the stuff that doesn't feel good to you, because particularly as a CEO, your energy and your creativity are the most important resources. And if you're doing all this stuff, not because you want to, but because someone else told you have to, you're wasting your energy on stuff that is not going to be sustainable. Like, the most sustainable way to build a business is to do what you love and do what interests you and do almost everything in your business from that first principle. Like, what are the things that you find to be fun and challenging and interesting, and build everything from that foundation, rather than being like, okay, to build a business, I have to do these things in these ways.
Now, of course, there's elements of running a business that y'all have to do because you just have to. Like you said, there's certain legal things you have to do. You actually have to, occasionally to pay attention to, how much money's coming in and those kind of routine things. How do you, if you're somebody who doesn't enjoy those, and you don't have to have ADHD to not enjoy some of the routine things, how do you manage to have those things get done?
Yeah, I mean, one, you delegate or offload as many as possible. That's one of my first pieces of advice to people. And the objection is always like, oh, it's going to cost money. But people don't think of how much money it's costing them to spend their energy doing things they don't want to do. That is not an equation that we usually look at. Is like, if I am sitting here dreading doing my taxes for a week, what could I have been doing in that week that actually would have more than paid for someone else to do my taxes? So that's one piece. The other piece is like, make it as easy and as frictionless as possible. And that means not worrying about making it perfect, not worrying about making it like the best. So a good example of this is, for me, I could have a bunch of very fancy spreadsheets, a very fancy system, especially I have a background that makes that possible. I have those skills. But you know what I do to keep track of my revenue and keep track of, sales and stuff? I have a really basic Excel spreadsheet that I put together, and it takes me 2 minutes to update. And as a result, I actually use it. If I had to do a bunch of stuff and set up a very complicated system, I would have never done it. So this is when really questioning the quote best practices is really powerful, because you want to make it as easy as possible to do the things that you don't want to do. And then probably my third piece of advice is really learning to live in the incremental. Like, do tiny, tiny little things. Like, some days, if we're talking about a spreadsheet, I don't want to update the whole thing, but I'll go in and maybe update my sales numbers for a particular month. And that means I am closer to having a complete picture. You just always want to be moving a little bit closer to your goal. So learning to just do tiny things, your brain is going to object less to doing really tiny things. So that's one of the skills I would with a lot of clients, especially with ADHD. You cannot have these big plans and grand visions and for getting stuff you don't like done. You just need to do tiny little things at a time, and it really gets you a lot closer to what you want.
So as a CEO, let's say you have a support team. How do you make it supportive of neurodiversity?
Ooh, great question. I think it's like anything. You really want to understand what each individual person's needs and wants are. So it's really treating individuals as humans who have very different wiring. And that means even if you have two people who have ADHD, they aren't going to have the same needs. They aren't going to have the same strengths and weaknesses. So it's about just not assuming that people are going to work in a certain way or that people are going to want the same things. It's about getting to know your team and letting their strengths shine and not making them feel bad about the things that they are less good at. Because any person, no matter how brilliant, talented, experienced they are, is going to have things that they're better at and worse at. So like, how do you work with someone's strengths, regardless of what kind of nervous system they have, to really help them thrive? And that means getting to know them as humans rather than as like employees who are doing tasks.
Shocker idea there.
I know, right? Treating humans as humans.
As you mentioned earlier, neurodiversity is advantageous. Otherwise, it wouldn't have stuck around. So how do we use our diversity to our advantage? So let's say you have ADHD. How do you use that to your advantage?
So it's about knowing your strengths. So one of the things is like building a relationship with yourself where you actually look at what you're good at and what you love. If you don't know that, it's an opportunity to build self-intimacy. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece is really seeing how your differences allow you to show up in the world in a way that is different. Like it is actually just different because your nervous system is wired differently. You actually literally see the world differently if we think about how our brains are wired, which means you get to be someone who challenges norms. You get to be someone who challenges how we do things. This is why I think so many people with ADHD end up as entrepreneurs, not just because we're intensely creative and, we like being our own bosses, all that kind of stuff. It's also because we see better ways to do things because we work differently. We've always worked differently. So anyone who has something about them that sort of is off from the typical, it gives you a fresh perspective. So learn what your fresh perspective is. Learn where you can add value in a way that other people might not even be thinking about. Like that's the crazy part. You might see problems that other people don't even know exist. This is why many of my clients are like rebels in some way, shape, or form. They're people who see how things are done and are like, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it my way, or I want to change things. And it's because you can't help but see the world through those eyes.
Now, I know that you have just launched a group program called the Black Sheep Playground. Can you tell me a little bit about the program, but then also can you talk about how you went about creating it?
Absolutely. So yeah, this has been a passion project and I'm so excited it exists in the world. So it's essentially a community for neurodivergent empowerment. It's really about helping people realize there is no right way to live your life or build a business or build a career, that you get to make up the rules. And one of the most powerful, empowering things you can do is make up your own rules. It can be fun. It can be so fun to do this. And when you sort of throw off the chains of everyone else's shoulds and rules, you have like complete freedom to do anything you want, which is pretty magical. So the program is built around that. So it's a community. We also do like group coaching around these topics. So I have live coaching three weeks out of a month. There's a whole like curriculum that you can do self-paced. But the whole program I designed kind of subversively such that everything isn't fixed. So I'm adding to the curriculum. I'll be taking away from it at some point. The other day, spontaneously, we have a theme each month, and this month is revolution. And so I spontaneously issued a challenge to everyone to dress up as if you were leading a revolution. So like things like that, where we're really just playing with the idea that there's a right way to build a group or a right way to build a program, because I want people to see there is no prescription. There's no right format. There's just what you think is fun. And anytime I have forced myself to like follow someone else's template, I lose interest. Whereas because this is my template, this is what I want to do, it's so much fun. I have no friction or trouble going in and doing stuff in the playground because I'm like, oh my God, I can issue fashion challenges because I feel like it. Yes, obviously. I'm going to make silly badges for people because I want to.
Which the badges are adorable.
They are really cute. I have a bit, I mean, anyone with ADHD has done a million different things, but I have a bit of an visual design background. So I have fun with that kind of stuff occasionally. This all came about because I actually did a program it started at the end of last summer. So I guess it would have been last fall. And it was great. People got value out of it, but I followed kind of the, linear course kind of format. And people learned a lot, don't get me wrong, but it didn't feel right. Like it didn't light me up and make me feel like this is the best thing ever. Because I was following someone else's template. So I had to step back, and through working with my coach, Simone Soul, she really challenged me to stop thinking about it, which is funny because I'm someone who spends a lot of time in my head. I did all of the right things. I was trying to analyze it and, use all these research tools I know from my previous life. And she just was like, no, you need to stop thinking about it so much. Like you need to get aligned with the energy here. Like you need to start feeling into what you want. So that's what I did. And it was really messy and hard, but I marinated, I stewed. And I started letting it just feel joyful and fun. And that's where it came from. And I created it in a very ADHD way. I was putting the pieces together sort of haphazardly. It seems haphazardly, but it's like building something out of Legos. Like each individual Lego isn't going to build the house, but once you put them together, it starts looking like something. That's essentially the process I use to build the whole thing. And actually is the process I use to build a lot of things. So just the structure of the program and the creation process very much was embracing this whole neurodivergence empowerment, which I think is why it's resonated so much with people and why it's going to just be the biggest, best, most magical place to hang out in the world. So
when I saw your post of the dress up, I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. But also as you were talking about it, and then you were talking about building something with joy and fun, I kind of got chills because I think that's what every entrepreneur needs to do, is because otherwise you're not going to enjoy it 5 years down the road. If you're really trying to build something with a legacy, you need to really make it your own and enjoy it. And I'm thinking to your recent interview with Simone on her podcast, where you talked about your people are there for you, not necessarily your offer. They're here for your energy. And so the first thing that you created wasn't your energy. This Black Sheep Playground is you.
100%. And as a result, it means as long as I continue to be me, which I hope, fingers crossed, I don't know how to not be me at this point. It means that the playground will be successful. Like that's the thing. I get to mold it into whatever I want, whatever format I want. I get to play with whatever I want. And as long as it's sort of aligned with the things that bring me joy and the things that I know are helpful for my brain and my clients, I just trust that it's going to be a success. And it has been. I mean, it already is. And like, we're just at the beginning, but if you try to do something in a way that doesn't, have that sort of joyful energy, you're going to burn out. And don't get me wrong, I hear the objections in people's head, which is like, well, things aren't fun all the time. No, they aren't. True. But there's a difference between things being hard in pursuit of a joyful mission versus things being hard because you're doing things in a way that you think you should. Like I am willing to do hard things because I knew the Black Sheep Playground had to exist. I was like, yep, this is something that has to exist in the world. If, however, my goal was like, well, I have to have a group program and it has to have these parameters, I'm not going to do the hard things. Like when it gets hard, I'll immediately flip the table and move on to something else, which is often what happens. It's why you can't rely on excitement as the driving factor to build something. It's great when you have excitement, lean into it, but it can't be the only thing.
That it's kind of like relationships. The new relationship energy does fade.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good metaphor. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not magical and amazing and that you shouldn't enjoy that new relationship energy, but know that the foundation of the relationship can't be that. It can't be that, new sexy hormone excitement. It has to be, building an actual relationship. And that's what you're doing with your program or a group or a business. You're building a relationship with it that's ideally going to stand the test of time.
Just a few moments ago, you made the comment that you don't know how not to be yourself. And I think with a lot of people who are especially new to the world of building their business and promoting themselves and being on social media, it is hard to be themselves. What got you there? And what kind of advice would you give?
That's a really good question. What did get me here? A lifetime of not being myself and having it suck. It's what got me here.
That one right there.
Especially, if we're gonna boil it down, it was getting really honest with myself, and also building. I keep mentioning like self-intimacy. That actually feels like one of the core things that leads you to be able to be yourself. Because if you know who you are, how are you going to actually be that person? So a lot of it was actually just getting to know myself and being honest about what I wanted. I spent so much time and so much energy not wanting things because of stupid reasons or like made up reasons or reasons of society. Like talking about relationships, like one of the things that I would often tell myself is like, I don't need a partner because, I'm a feminist and I'm a badass and I'm independent. Like I like having a romantic relationship. So it's really peeling back the layers of the onion about understanding what you actually want, really when it gets down to it, and not shaming yourself for it, not shaming yourself for the things you want, who you want to be, because the shame is the thing that keeps that person from showing up. That's why we don't show up as our full selves. It's some form of shame or guilt or fear. So understanding what you're afraid of and peeling back the layers on that's the biggest thing to do. And it's hard work. I'm not going to sugarcoat and say that it's like all fun and sunshine and rainbows. Oftentimes it gets real dark. When you peel back that onion, there's some rotting onion layers in there and they do not smell good. But at the other end, or I guess there isn't an end, once you get more into the onion, I need a better metaphor than onions because no one wants to get into the inside of an onion. Maybe like a gobstopper or something. Tootsie Pop.
I like the gobstopper idea. Those are
yeah, those are good. Okay, so gobstopper. We get to the middle of the gobstopper, or like get closer to the middle of the gobstopper. That's when things start feeling fun and easy because it is actually, once you get there, so much easier to be yourself than not be yourself. That's why I was like, I don't think anymore I know how to not be myself. This is exhausting. It takes a lot of work to mask things and not want what you want. So build a relationship with yourself that's built on like self-intimacy. If I'm going to sum it up, and understand what you're afraid of and ashamed of. No big deal. Yeah, I just solved all of human meaning and life, universe, everything. We're done. We don't have to do anymore.
I know that you recently did a Instagram live about whether or not you should seek a medical diagnosis if you suspect you have ADHD. And I will definitely link to that. But can you talk a little bit about that in just a brief bit?
Absolutely. So once we already touched on some of the issues in psychiatric medicine. It is not we think, at least I used to think of medicine as like this objective, unimpeachable thing, but it's not because it's practiced by humans. And as a result, it includes all the foibles of human existence. So the reason to pursue a diagnosis really comes down to like, what do you want to get out of it? If it feels validating to have someone tell you, like a professional with, tests and stuff, then do it. if that's something that you feel like will feel empowering, I love it. The other very practical reasons are if you want to pursue medication, which I'm a big fan of. It's not for everyone, but for me, it's something I've chosen to do, and it's made a huge difference in my life. Or to get formal recognition by certain institutions. Like when I was in grad school, to get extensions on things, I had to have a formal medical diagnosis. But you don't need, if essentially those things aren't relevant to you, like if you know you don't want to try medication, if you don't need like accommodations, if you know the label from a doctor is not going to be particularly empowering for you, you don't need it. And you can still use the label. Like we know that the way we apply these labels through diagnostics is very flawed. So even if you're someone who's gone and seen a doctor, a psychiatrist, and they said, well, you don't quite match all the things, you can still use the label too. That's the thing. Because the label, at the end of the day, is just words you're applying to help sort of shortcut and explain why you are the way you are. And you want it to be something that's in service to you. And if it's in service to you, who the fuck cares if a doctor is the one who gave you the label? Yeah, I would say that's sort of my like 2-minute spiel on my thoughts on that. There are a lot of complex sociocultural realities associated with accessing medical care as well. So one of the things we really want to be careful of is, discounting or discrediting someone because they don't have the resources to access something. We don't know that story. Medicine is a privilege. A diagnosis is a privilege. So the idea of excluding people because our system is flawed just seems silly to me. It just seems crazy. Like what do I lose by someone else using a label that's empowering to them? The answer is nothing.
And it can help you understand a person so much more.
Yeah, the reason we use the word is so that we have like a shortcut to like, because I could go through and tell you all of the ways that I am the way I am, but we'll be here for 3 days. Whereas if I'm like, I have an ADHD brain, you can at least ideally imagine some of the things that might be an issue for me and some of the things I'm going to be really good at. So it's shorthand. It's a heuristic.
My partner has not been officially diagnosed, but everything, it's like, nope, we know. Yeah. And it has helped me tremendously know that, okay, when he's down in his workshop, it doesn't matter how many clocks I put up. He's having fun. 12 hours will go by. He won't have gone to the bathroom. So we put an intercom system in, and I can like buzz him and be like, 30 minutes before dinner, wrap up what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not because he's not conscientious or he doesn't care about what else is going on. None of these things is true. It's just, once he gets in that zone, his nervous system is hyper fixated on something, and it acts as like a cone, like it's a flat, they call it the cone of attention. So it's just the way he is. And there are a lot of things like that about ADHD or autism or anything that is sort of a label we give to certain behaviors and certain symptoms and certain nervous system wiring that helps us understand, oh, this isn't because this person hates me or doesn't want the house to be clean. This is why certain things are harder for them. And this is also why certain things are really easy for them.
Well, I really appreciate you being on here today. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. The best place to find me is probably Instagram. I'm Meg Kierstead. I think there's only one of me with P person with my name. So if you look for Megan Kierstead, Kierstead, you will find me. I also have a website, which is just megankierstead.com. And between those two things, you probably can find almost anything you need with regarding me and what I do in the Black Sheep Playground, which is a lifetime membership and open all the time. So if it's something of interest to you, highly recommend you join. It's pretty much the best place ever.
Excellent. Is there anything you want to include that we didn't touch on yet?
I just want to say that if you have ADHD or if you recently got a diagnosis, just know that it doesn't have to be something that is a disability or something that holds you back. It is, in fact, if you learn to adapt to the world and also know that the world is occasionally going to be a jerk to you, you can really thrive. In the moment you understand what things really light you up and what things also you don't need to be good at, you really can free yourself. Because the reality is, I'm pretty terrible at doing dishes. I hate doing dishes. I'm not particularly good at it. But in some ways, why am I judging myself for not being able to do dishes when I'm really good at deconstructing social systems, which that's a very rare and awesome skill to have. But, the time we spend feeling bad about the things that we maybe are less good at, you can just reallocate to the things you are good at. And we're the people who get to go out and change the world and do really big things that other people wouldn't even think were possible. So learn to love it. Doesn't mean it isn't difficult sometimes. Doesn't mean society isn't going to make it hard for you. But you don't have to let it feel like something that is chaining you down and holding you back. That's my biggest thing.
No, I love that. I think I'm a very much plan, schedule person, and now I'm with somebody who is spontaneous, and I'm loving it because I'm helping him, make sure bills are paid, and he's helping me learn how to be spontaneous and creative and, let go of my scheduled, regimented life. So
yeah, we need all of the kinds of people. That's the funny part. If it was just ADHD humans, we'd be in trouble. The lights would get turned off. But we also need people who are weird and spontaneous and creative and going to do wacky things that everyone is no, that's not going to work. And then it does. So we need the full range of humanity to actually make progress in the world.
Well, thank you again so much for being on.
You are so welcome. This was fun.
And that's it for another episode of Here's What I Learned. Show notes and transcripts can be found at jackiehays.online. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to my emails to receive access to my free launch resource library. Inside the library, you'll find all the resources I used with my Launch Strategy VIP Day clients to create their strategic, intentional, and hustle-free launches. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. Until next time.